they were saving chicken fat and cooking with that. They were not cutting all the fat off the meat. The cuts of meat that they were getting that were poorer, least expensive cuts of meat actually had more fat on them, right? And so those were the cuts that you went for because you could long braise them and then the fat would cook through and make it more flavorful. So I, in the past 2 years, have been really focusing on food and the idea of bringing healthy fats back into my life and not being afraid of them. And also, more importantly, getting rid of sugars and starchy foods and highly processed foods. So I am now I'm at this point where I am looking at the meat that I eat because I love red meat. I no longer eat boneless, skinless chicken breasts because they just, to me, have no flavor. They're flavor carriers. So I can find more flavorful meat. If I can find locally raised pork or locally raised beef, I'm going to go for that. Or if it's locally raised birds like this, where they were allowed to pick for their food in the garden and that kind of growth, that will definitely help. Heritage breed turkey. These turkeys are mature more slowly, so they're 24 to 30 weeks on average to maturity. The average hen size is 12 pounds, so you can see that they're not focused on having that massive amount of body weight on them. The darker meat gives more flavor. Heritage birds are not necessarily organic or free range, so don't think just because it says heritage on it that it is raised in the way that you may want. You may decide, I definitely want it to be organically raised, or I want it to at least be free range. I want it to be able to go out on a daily basis and pick up insects and things like that, and then in the evening go into its barn. Heritage breeds cost more money to raise because they mature more slowly, right? With turkeys, you can turn them out every 18 weeks. With these guys, it takes 30 weeks in order to turn them over. So they do end up costing more per pound. Some of the heritage breeds, these were breeds, it's like chickens. If you have ever raised chickens or you know of somebody that does, different chickens have different qualities to them. Maybe some are better layers in the winter. Maybe some have more, they don't have big breast meat, but they have really great legs. They're built differently. So it's the same with the turkeys, that for different qualities in them. So again, that would be something you'd want to ask the farm or the farmer where you're purchasing them from. I did try to find locally where can I get heritage birds. If the farm doesn't register in Massachusetts, you can look it up on Google. It'll be harder to find. But now is the time. People are placing their orders right now for Thanksgiving. So if you are thinking that you want to get a local turkey, you need to place your order now because then they'll be all gone. Now, in a pinch, I had one Thanksgiving where I got a frozen bird and my friend said to me, "Oh, you could put it in my refrigerator. I have one in the garage." And I said, "Oh, that's great." And it had been sitting in the refrigerator for 5 days. It takes, quite a long time to thaw. So you do have to refrigerate it for quite some time. Well, don't refrigerate it in a refrigerator that's sitting in an unheated garage. Because come Thanksgiving, that turkey was frozen. So we did all the horrible things that you're not supposed to do. You are not supposed to thaw out any kind of meat. You don't want to put it in hot water because it will just thaw and cook the outside meat while the inside is frozen, right? You want to put it in cold water because cold water will be warmer than the ice block that it is. So it will very gradually bring it up to temperature. But what we realized was we were not going to have turkey that day unless I went to my local farm stand who had been selling turkeys, and lo and behold, people did not pick up their birds. So we were able to literally swoop in and grab a last minute turkey. Thank God they were open on Thanksgiving Day. So anyway, let my misfortune be a lesson for you. So fresh versus frozen. Frozen turkeys, least expensive due to the ease of shipping and storage. So because they can be shipped in you know, everything is frozen, it's much easier for them to do that. And then, you know, the freezer space, they're able to keep them in that. Also, their most consistent quality due to the freezing, because they are not subject to, they're in freezers, so they are frozen solid, their temperature is not changing. If you go to the grocery store and, you know, if the refrigeration is in question, you have fresh birds, the ones that are up top exposed to the warmer air, you know, may not be perfect. You know, I've never gotten sick from a bird like that, but all I'm saying is that the frozen birds will be consistent in, you know, they have been completely frozen and stabilized. You want to thaw them in the refrigerator 5 hours for every pound of the turkey's weight. And I just double that just to be sure. Because once they're thawed out, they will stay in your refrigerator for a couple of days, not to worry. So, fresh turkeys must be refrigerated and cooked within 2 to 3 days of the purchase, and they require no thawing time.
What about defrosting in a microwave?
I wouldn't do
I've
that.
never done it, but I just wondered.
Good luck fitting it in a
Yeah.
microwave.
Yeah,
That's my big thing.
that's a good point,
Oh,
yeah.
how big is your microwave? There you go.
No, it's
Yeah,
you're right.
yeah, but you don't want to do anything like that. Is that's like putting them into a hot water bath.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's going to warm up the outside. So you do want to be cautious.
Huge microwave.
Yeah, yes.
Are the frozen turkeys more likely to have additives in them and be more processed?
Thank you for mentioning that. So you must know that the turkey package will have ingredients listed. Don't just because it's a turkey doesn't mean it's only a turkey. There are a lot of birds, and some frozen, some fresh, where they are pumped with a salted solution in order, again, to make it so that it's moist. So essentially, they're pre-basted for you. But you need to decide, do you trust the solution, what is in it, what are the ingredients in it? So if you are somebody that wants that result, but you don't want to buy an already, you know, pre-basted turkey or one that is in a salted solution, then you can do it yourself. If you want to do it yourself, I do have a slide up here, and we talk a little bit about that. But that's a really important question. Is, you know, look, because like I think the Jenny O birds are generally pumped with something. Something has been put into them, so they're more flavorful too because they have flavored them with a salt and maybe herbs or spices or something. Pre-basted turkeys here, right? Basted turkeys that have been injected with a sodium-based solution to increase the juiciness of the bird. They may be injected with flavor enhancers, fat, broth, or stock. And if it says broth or stock, you don't know what it is. And if it says fat, you don't know what it is. It may not even be turkey fat, right? So, you know, and that again, in my quest to understand what I'm eating, the fat that is being, you know, and the foods that I am eating is really important to me. I do not want to have processed fats. I do not want to have canola oil, vegetable oil, any seed oils like sunflower seed oil, grape seed oil. These are inflammatory, highly processed oils. They are processed in a multi-step process. One of the steps in that towards the end is actually bleaching the oil to clarify it so it looks nice in the bottle that you're purchasing it in.
So I use olive oil most of the time, and if you have a recipe that calls for a neutral oil,
Yes.
is there any neutral oil that
Sure,
you
yeah, and that's a great point because we've been sold that a canola oil, a
Right.
soybean oil, these
Right.
are neutrally flavored
Right.
oils, right? So Avocado oil would be a good choice, yeah. Coconut oil, you can get one that is, there's virgin, which has a little bit of a coconut flavor to it, or you can get the refined, which is, just another, not the processing that we're looking at for these other oils, but, because it's still a solid oil.
Yes.
So you want to go back to using oils and fats that are naturally produced. So we're talking about butter, okay? We want to use olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil, ghee, which is clarified butter, which has the butter solids removed, so it raises the point at which you can cook it, right, the burning point. Chicken fat, you can use bacon fat, pork fat, lard, go back, go back, go back. Go back to the way it was.
What about Mazola or Crisco?
No. Crisco oil,
Trans.
so used to be machinery oil.
Oh, God.
So vegetable oils were manufactured for the lubrication of machinery back, in during the wars and all of that. And then they had a huge, now they had been making so much of it for a purpose, and then the wars were over, and then they had the production already going, and some scientists said, I have a process that we can use that to that oil, and we can solidify it, and it will look like lard. And so then they sold it, they marketed it to the housewife as a healthier oil, because they were just starting to associate fats with heart disease, but the association was so loose and so questionable, but they just went ahead and approved this. So
Spry was another one when I was growing up. It was a solid.
Spry, yeah.
You remember Spry? Is
Oh, yes.
peanut oil
Oh, I never
okay?
used that.
Some recipes call specifically for that, and I think it's because of the high.
high heat. That is on my list of,
Okay.
but it's, the thing what you have to remember is that while you're not using it in your kitchen, any packaged goods that have fat in them will probably have some kind of a vegetable oil, soybean oil, canola oil, because those are inexpensive oils that the manufacturers use. And manufacturers' goal is to make packaged foods what's called hyper-palatable, so that you cannot resist. The flavors are perfect. It's fat, salt, and sugar all mixed together in the perfect formulation to make you want to have that food. So that's why, yes.
Avocado oil handles high heat, from what I understand, is that not correct?
I think I don't know that it would do a peanut oil. That's a good question.
And then it's also grapeseed oil? I think that's another one that handles high heat.
But that's a seed oil.
Right,
So to
Well,
manufacture that takes a tremendous amount of processing.
yeah,
Yeah, so we want to stay away from that.
yeah.
Is peanut oil okay?
That is one, it's kind of in the gray area. So if that's something you want to use, I would just, look into that so far as being an inflammatory. But anyway, so we want to watch what is being injected and put into these products that we consider to be, it's just a turkey. Well, no, it could be a little bit more, so you want to be cautious about that. So how should you cook your turkey? There are many different ways you can do it. I have smoked a turkey, which is, it's a lot of fun to do once. It's an all-day project with, in my opinion, a lot of anxiety because you've got to keep the fire going just so. But there are some great smokers out there, and I love smoked meat, so I'm all for that. If that's what you want to do, then typical roasting of the turkey. You can. Some people do the deep fried turkey. I don't do that. I've never felt comfortable about that, just because of it's dangerous. I don't like to be around deep fryers, so that's not my thing. But also, you want to be cautious of the oil that you're deep frying it in, right? Now, this turkey is just the turkey breast. So if you are a family that just wants turkey breast, or maybe you're just I'm just doing Thanksgiving this year for the 5 of us. I'm not going to someone's house and I'm not inviting a lot of people over, so, you know, am I gonna get the whole turkey? My kids don't wanna take this stuff home, I don't know why, it's like they don't want my antiques either, they don't want my leftover turkey and they don't want my antiques, so.
Just don't need-
Yeah, so what I may do is just get one of these, this is called a hotel breast, it's just the breast meat, if that's what you want, that's great.
I buy those all the time.
Yeah.
They're very expensive though. I buy kosher.
Yes, okay, so kosher is a whole other ballgame, because they do, part of the koshering process is to go into a salted solution. I like the way kosher birds taste.
I love them.
I do, yeah, because they're already salted, but they're not pumped with a solution. They are, it's just the kosher processing of them.
But the breast is much more than a regular turkey.
Yeah, yes, but
You
consider,
like the white meat, so.
right, so that's what you're paying
Yes.
for, yeah. What, you get Bell and Evans?
No, I get Empire.
Oh, Empire, okay,
Yeah.
yep. And then roasting a turkey, roasting it, with the stuffing in it or outside of it. So if you're going to fill the cavity of a turkey, you're going to increase the amount of time that it takes to cook. Because now you're taking what was a hollow, essentially, bird, and you're filling it, so that will make it denser and it will take more time. Some people like to do that, with the idea that the juices go into the stuffing. I personally like to cook it separately, and then I just take whatever the drippings are and I will add some of that to the stuffing. Because I like to have a lot of control when I'm preparing the meal. I like to know at what stage everything is. When you're making your stuffing, you can make your stuffing 2 weeks in advance, just don't cook it and put it in the freezer. Just get it all set and ready to go, stick it in the freezer. Then when you thaw it out, then you're pouring on the broth, finishing it up, popping it in the oven, and it takes about a half hour, 45 minutes, depending on how much stuffing you have. So that can be done, for the most part, the prep can be done in advance, which is really nice about that. And then, of course, there are different kinds of stuffing, and we're going to try something new. In fact, I've never made the recipe before, but I saw it. That's what I said. I went to the grocery store with 2 recipes in mind, came out with 4 recipes in mind. Neither of the 2 originals made it on the revised list. So one of them is a recipe we're going to try for the first time tonight. Here's just a simple brine. Brine includes the kosher salt and the sugar, and then you can put whatever kind of herbs and things that you want into it. You do need to submerge the turkey in the brine. I have used, at one year I bought a cooler just for that purpose. So it had to be tall and kind of rectangular so that you could submerge the bird into it, and then it would help to keep it cold. You could get a 5-gallon, I've gotten a 5-gallon bucket from Home Depot, and that's my brining bucket. You can do it that way too.
What are the yellow things? Are those lemons?
It looks like lemons and oranges. Yeah, so here's, apples, onions, you can put all that kind of stuff in there. This person put it into a big, clear garbage bag. I have done it in a garbage bag just because I didn't have room to put the bucket in, and then would just turn the bird every couple of hours or whatever.
And it's not refrigerated?
It's a refrigerator. Yeah,
Oh,
they
you
just
have
have
to be
there,
able
but
to fit that in.
fit it in,
It's
yeah,
easier
yeah,
to fit
yeah.
that in than a bucket. then.
Right.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
bucket sounded,
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't pop.
right.
Herb butter. This is a really great way to add moisture to your turkey. So, basically you're just mixing butter with all these kinds of herbs, and, you can make any kind of herb butter that you want and just give it a taste, and, if it tastes wonderful, you want to use that. You want to soften it up, right, room temperature, so that you can then stick it underneath the skin and try to get it down around the bird and into the legs, and that way it's pretty much self-basting, and then you can, that butter will then melt down inside the bird, and then the drippings will come out, and then you can just, baste it over the turkey if you want to do that. Here are some smaller turkeys. there that have, slabs, they just took sticks of butter and just cut them up and put them underneath the skin. I bet you that's delicious. And then they just filled the cavity with herbs. I have done turkeys where I have filled the tray with big chunks of onion, celery, a couple of carrots. I caution on too many carrots because that can make your final gravy too sweet. So I stick to the less sugary vegetables, garlic, and then just put the bird on top of it. And then all of those things then end up cooking in the basting, the juices that come out of the turkey. And then I just put them in a food processor and give them a whir, and that's my gravy. I'm done, But the other thing to consider is, making your gravy completely separate from the bird so that you don't have that anxiety of getting the bird out and, then making the gravy. Although, I will tell you this, your turkey can be done and out of the oven 2 hours before you're ready to serve, because it will stay hot. What I do is I wrap, when it comes out, you have to let it rest. So I've taken it out of the roasting pan, put it onto another pan, wrapped it in foil, and then taken bath towels and put them over the bird and let it sit on the counter for 2 hours. I've done it for 3 hours while I do everything else I have to do. Now the oven is open, it's much more leisurely, the wine is flowing, everything is perfect, and then you take all the covering off the bird and you cut into it. And let's be honest, if you're serving on a buffet, how long does that turkey stay hot once you cut into it? Not long enough for you to get through the buffet, right? So the important thing on a buffet or when you're serving a dinner like this is to have the gravy be hot. Because then you're pouring hot gravy over the bird that may have sat while people go through the line and come to room temperature. So don't make yourself go crazy trying to keep everything hot. When you're planning your menu, have items that should and can be served at room temperature, having plenty of those items. Items like mashed potatoes, and we're going to make a mashed cauliflower instead of a mashed potato. Those can go in. I'm actually going to start, I'll tell you what this is in a bit. Oh gosh. Would it be horrible if this never lit? It's just vinegar. And I'll tell you what this is in a few minutes. Anyway, so having your mashed potatoes be hot. Again, you can make those, somewhat in advance and then just cover them. And you can finish it, say you've mashed them and you've put your butter in and you still haven't put in, I put heavy cream in. Warm up your heavy cream and put that in at the last minute, and that's helping to keep it hot, okay? The gravy should be hot, the mashed potatoes need to be hot. My mother always served a wild rice dish, but it wasn't ever hot. I don't recall that it was hot. It never bothered me either, because that was just, the dish. So give that some consideration when you're asking people to bring food. Make sure they're bringing something that they're not then, can I get in there on the stove and do a little, no. Please bring something that's ready, give them the salad to do that's ready to go, and you can dress it for everybody. Bring them, ask them to bring the dessert, that it's all done, you don't have to bake the pie. If you do have to bake the pie the day before. If I have a pie that has a top crust on it, I bake it the day before, I put it up in a cupboard, no cover on it. Because if you put something on it, it softens the crust. So do it the day before, the crust is nice and crispy, just stick it up on top of a cabinet or something and let it sit, or stick it somewhere. The other thing too, I tell people, it's Thanksgiving, it's November, late November, so it should be cold outside. So I use my garage as a refrigerator for the foods that need to be, they're sitting on platters or they're in process or whatever, and they need to be cold. So I will use, set up tables in the garage and use that as a kind of staging area. So, don't be afraid to do that if you have vegetable trays or whatever. If you're serving cheese platters with sliced meats, let those come to room temperature. Cheese and sliced meats always taste better at room temperature. So don't, pull something right out of the refrigerator and serve it. It just doesn't have as much flavor. Especially if you're buying really nice cheeses, you want them to come to room temperature. So I'll often do those platters in the morning and just let them sit with a cover, a towel on top of them. Okay? So we talked about this idea of keeping it moist by letting it sit for, quite some time. And here are the last of the birds. I don't know that he ever did that again. I never did it again, so that was all right. Oh, and a little tip too, if you're going to help somebody harvest turkeys, because there's a lot of, you gotta get what we ended up doing was, people started to pluck the birds, and that was just taking way too long. It's difficult. I'd never done that before. So someone brought those turkey fryers, and we put boiling water in them, and after the birds, we just dipped them, and then all the feathers came off. But what I did learn is don't put lip gloss on, because the feathers stick to your lip gloss. Okay.
No lip gloss for me.
Yes. Learn from me. Okay, so here what I've got going is I am making in here a cranberry sauce, okay? And so it is essentially, it's very similar, I think I just tossed the bag. I am looking for my cranberry bag. Did I leave it here? I'm just looking for the recipe on the cranberry bag, because this recipe I'm making cranberry sauce is my friend's recipe. Sorry, I was putting through my garbage, which is only vegetables, but anyway, I think typically it's a whole bag of cranberries, and then it's like a cup of sugar and a cup of water, and you just cook them until basically the cranberries pop, and that's what you're hearing is them popping. So I've made some adjustments to that. So I've cut down on the sugar. That's way too much
I
sugar.
do that too, I only use like a half. to
That's
a
what I use, a
cup.
half cup, and you can use less too. I mean, really what I would do is just, add less and less till you get to that point where you're like, okay, it could use just a little bit more sugar. But I love to add some flavors to that. So what I'm gonna add actually is I am adding fresh rosemary to this. So I'm all about the herbs, so I'm just run your hands through this. This is right out of the garden. And so we're just gonna chop up and put a little bit in there. And then we're going to add to this, once it is done, I'm going to set it aside. Now the beautiful thing about cranberries is they gel themselves. So there's no adding thickener to this. They're like apples. They have their own pectin in them, so they help to gel them up. So what we're gonna do is, after they have cooled down, we are going to add to them an entire bag of frozen raspberries, and that's it.
Oh, that sounds.
How much water did you say?
You're gonna get the recipe for this, so it's
Okay.
just a cup of water.
We are getting a recipe.
Yes, with the whole bag.
Oh, cool.
And then I put a teaspoon or so of rosemary in it. Now, this sauce is not just for Thanksgiving, because I use it to put on ice cream, I put it on cake.
I love it.
I keep it frozen, and I know exactly what went into there. Okay, so that's the beauty of this. If you are a low carb person, you can, use erythritol in it, but I would do it when the heat is off. Or you can use your sweetener. I'm personally not a fan of artificial sweeteners, so I'll just use less of the sugar. Or another thing is, instead of regular sugar, you could add brown sugar to this. And brown sugar gives it another level of richness because there's a little molasses in brown sugar, okay? So I'm just gonna let that cook for another minute or so, and then we're gonna go ahead and get started on the next recipe. So I told you we're gonna try and do, basically, instead of stuffing with bread, we're doing cauliflower stuffing. So it's not gonna have the same texture as stuffing because of the lack of bread, but when I think of Thanksgiving dinner and all the things that are on the table that have so many starchy, and sugar ingredients, changing up the stuffing recipe, for me would be a win-win. But some people love stuffing, so maybe that's the thing you just don't mess with, right? Maybe you do less of something else. Here's something to note. There are starches that are called resistant starches. So starches that are resistant starches, our body does not digest the starch in the same way as non-resistant starches. So for example, potatoes that have been cooked and then refrigerated are resistant starches. So we do not absorb the carbohydrates, the starches in the same way. So actually it's cut down by like 50%. So if you're somebody who's trying to cut back on your starches, yeah, your eyebrows went thump. If you're trying to cut down on your starches, cook your potatoes, refrigerate them. You can reheat them, but once they've been into that refrigerated state, it changes the chemical makeup of the starch. Sweet potatoes is another. So if you serve sweet potatoes as a side dish, you want to make it into the resistant starch. So cook them the day before, refrigerate them, and then reheat them. Bread is the same. Keep your bread in your freezer. And now you have changed the structure of the starches in the bread. So rice is also the same. So you can start to do a little bit of research on resistant starches and see what falls into that category. You might be really surprised and happy to discover that, oh gee, all I have to do is this. This is great. Yeah, I mean, it's still gonna have, it still has that stuff, it still has carbohydrates in it, but it's a different type now. So, okay, now I've got, this is cooked up and thickened up, so I let it thicken up the water. So now as it sits, it will continue to thicken up. So I'm just gonna set this aside.
At what point do you put the
No.
frozen bag of raspberries? When it's hot or?
No, because if I put it in hot, the raspberries kind of dissolve.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna let this cool down at the end before I serve it to you. That's when I'm gonna drop them in. And it will thaw the raspberries, and then we'll be all set.
And these are frozen raspberries, not.
They are frozen, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all set. Now we're gonna go ahead and, let's see, I think I'm going to get our, I've got, where are my recipes? Oh, so I'm gonna go ahead and get the cauliflower stuffing going, okay? So we have our head of cauliflower, and I have cut it into small little florets because I'm going to roast them, and that's why I have my air fryer here. So just to get them ready to roast, I have my olive oil. Put that in there, and I always season with salt and pepper. And again, I haven't made this before. I hope you like it. Sometimes it's nice though to see, you're seeing this happening in real time, and if there's a mistake, you're gonna watch me correct it. And for the two of us, we're gonna learn a lot from that. Okay, so, and that happens. So first of all, just toss this with olive oil. And then I'm gonna drop it into my air fryer. Do any of you have an air fryer at home?
No, but I'm curious to see.
Ah, okay, so let me just show you what this is real quick. This is a 5.8 quart air fryer. If you're considering buy one, don't get one that's any smaller than that. Because what this is a container, and you see it's got holes here and holes in the bottom. So what happens is there is the heating element up at the top here. Behind the heating element is a fan. When I turn this on, the fan blasts through the heating element, which pushes the hot air down here, goes through the food, through those holes. This is kind of hovering on the top of, in this basket. So the air comes through this piece here, hits the bottom, and then comes back up. So that's how it gets your food nice and crispy as if it were fried. Okay, but there's no frying, all right? So this is just sitting in there.
If you were at home, would you use the air fryer or would you roast conventionally?
Oh, it'll take me a lot less time to do it here.
Yeah.
And they'll get a lot crispier.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you're gonna put it in your oven, because you don't have one of these,
Yeah.
then you're gonna do it, I typically do it at like 425. If you have a convection oven, use that. Put this right, push it right to the back of the oven so it's right in front of that fan, not up here, not down here, right in front of that fan. Okay? All right, so we're gonna go up on our temperature. And then the time is pretty, this is the default time. So it's 15 minutes, 400, we'll see how that goes. Because they're having you do it at 450 degrees in your oven. But this is much smaller. Yes?
Probably this is just a question for me, maybe other people don't have convection ovens, but I've been a little puzzled as to the bake versus roast setting.
On a convection oven?
Yeah,
It depends. I'm not as familiar with those. Yeah, but the roast I think is going to come with more of a blast of air. If you bake and there's too much air, it can blow the top
Oh,
of
got
your
it.
stuff
Okay.
off of
oh,
it.
interesting, okay.
Yeah.
That's an interesting.
Yeah. But roasting will give you a nice crispy outcome. And often when you're roasting in a convection oven, you want to put it on a rack in a pan so that it essentially can get underneath.
Oh.
Right? Have you used one before?
I have a convection oven, I don't use it as often as.
I got one
Okay,
throw it out.
yeah. Well, I think what it is that people think that, oh, it's gonna change the way, how long it takes me to cook, and I don't understand what's the difference between convection bake and convection roast and all of that.
But I think you can look up those conversions
You-
real easy.
You can, and I'll tell you something, once you get started, you'll get the hang of it. I have never changed a recipe
Okay.
using my convection oven, to be quite honest. Now, partly it could be that I don't have a great convection oven. Unfortunately, I don't have a nice big fan. Some people have some really good quality ovens. If you've got a Thermador, or you have a Miele, or you have, you're paying for a really good convection oven, and you should really be using it. Yeah. Okay, let's move on, shall we? Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and do our vegetables. So typically, we're gonna use the same vegetables that we would in a regular stuffing, right? So we use celery. We use celery, onions, and then herbs. We're gonna use a little bit of garlic. So I've got my stick of celery, and the smaller I chop it, the quicker it will cook, right? So big stick of celery, I'm gonna cut it in half. Now I'm gonna cut this into strips, all the same width, right? Cut them all like that. Turn them in that direction, and then go through and slice them. Then it's not a lot of worrying about, working all over your cutting board. On the other hand, you could decide, well, I like bigger pieces. Okay, go right ahead. Just turn this upside down and slice. when you're buying your celery, I try to buy, it was hard today, I was looking through all of the celeries. I do get picky. I like ones that are lighter in green and tighter, because then I find them to be sweeter. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, so I've got my celery. Then this recipe is calling for onions to be sliced. So we take our onion, we're going to cut it from top to bottom. Okay, use 2 hands. I pinch the blade, wrap my hand around the blade, push down like that. Okay, then because I have cut it in half and have more surface area, it's easier for me to grab the onion skin and to take that off. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and cut the stem off, and I leave the root. Now, for you today, I'm going to show you, in this recipe, they call for you to cut this into strips. So I'm going to do 1 in strips, and then I'm going to dice 1, just so you get the look of it, and then we'll cook them up together. So here, for slicing it in strips, I cut the root off and the stem off, and then it's just a question of trying to cut them all the same size. Okay, now if you're a big crybaby, then you definitely want to go like that. Okay, and that's going to block.
They say to wear glasses.
What's that?
To wear glasses.
Well,
No, so you don't get that.
yeah, the goggles work better. Regular you have glasses. I still cry when I.
Yeah, because it comes in.
It comes in, yeah. I have contact lenses right now. Whenever I teach a class that's going to use, I put my contacts in. But if you work, say your range is here, turn on your fan and get that air circulating, and so that may help to pull those gases up and away from you. The other thing you could do, you could put a small fan right here, and it will just blow all of that away. If it really bothers you, some of us, it's just torture. The other thing I want to make sure is that you're using a sharp knife. If you're using a dull knife, you're mashing those cells, it breaks more, you will get more gases released, and you will cry more. Always use a sharp knife. All right, I'm going to actually, let me just pass around a sharp knife so you know what it feels like. Because I think a lot of us don't sharpen our knives, right? So when you get the knife, just pull your finger across, don't run it down the blade like that. Okay, this is Victorinox, which is Swiss Army, which is America's Test Kitchen. It's their favorite chef's knife. So that is a great knife. Okay, let's come back to our onion. So here we have our onion with the root still on, right? We're going to cut down to the root and leave it intact. So I take my nice sharp knife and I'm cutting nice thin strips, because the smaller I dice my onion, the faster it will cook, right? So nice thin strips down to the root without going through. Whoops, that went through. But for the most part, it's holding it all together. You can see that these pieces are pretty much the same width, okay? Now I turn my onion to the side, and then I cut across, and I'm done cutting my onion. Thank you. Okay? None of this, you'll see some professional chefs where they have your onion and you go like this. Don't do that. There's no reason to do that, okay? Because the onion, the way it grows, it will break up and you'll be fine. Okay, now, we have a cold pan. We're gonna use butter, right? Because the best stuffing is made with butter, right? I'm going to use butter, moderate flame. While it's still cold, I'm going to go ahead and add this. Going to let that heat up all together. Then we have garlic. So this is calling for minced garlic. So you can do a couple of things. If you chop your garlic, it's whole, and then you begin to chop it, it'll take for you forever to fine chop it. So what you wanna do is you wanna take your knife and put it over the edge of your board with the blade off the knife so that when you hit this and smash it, the knife can actually go flat on your cutting board. Okay, so I take this, I'm pushing with this hand, slamming it with that hand. Now it's nice and flat, so much easier to chop. The other thing you could do is get this, which is a garlic rocker, and put it right on your garlic. Done. Okay? And then just go back through. All right, now, we're going to soften this up, okay? And we want this, we want to speed this up a little, so we're going to cover it. And that will essentially help to steam it as well. All right, so we're trapping the heat in there, and that will help to soften these up. What we're looking for is for our vegetables to be soft and translucent, right? So that means the colors have dulled down, the cells have softened up, and all of that, we're going to getting more aromatics in there, and it's going to be much more flavorful, right? Releasing those sugars. Now, in just a few minutes, I'm going to go ahead and add the garlic. I generally don't add the garlic at the same time because garlic cooks much faster. Now, we want to get our herbs ready for this, okay? So, I am a huge fan. Don't ever throw these away, okay? Save them. Even if you're not going to use them right away, take them out, chop them up. I made an herb salé, which is herbs, salted herbs. So I chopped up a bunch of herbs, thyme, rosemary, celery leaves, parsley, put them all together and then layered them with salt and keep them in the refrigerator. And then anytime I need an herb mix like that, I take it out and it will last for about a year in the refrigerator. So look up that term, herb salé, S-A-L-E-E, it's a Canadian. And I had just seen it in that blog I told you all about, the Slow Down Farmstead, and she was doing it, and I have done it, and I've never done that before, and it was just amazing. Okay, now we're going to add some herbs to this that we recognize from our stuffings. So here we're going to be using some sage. So, oops, let me pass that around. And I've already got, I'm not going to use rosemary because I don't usually use rosemary with my turkey. I'm going to walk this around in just a second so you can see what we're looking at here.
Is it easier if we just come up?
No, that's all right. I'm happy to bring it around. So here I'm going to add my garlic. Okay, I'm going to lower this temperature down. Remember, we want to go over a moderate flame. We really do not want to brown this because we don't want to burn it. If we burn our garlic especially, it's going to get very sharp in flavor, very bitter. This is my celery from the garden. So we're going to add plenty of this in there. We're going to use plenty of celery greens. And I've got some flat leaf parsley here. So we're going to add that in. Now, you can add poultry seasonings if you like. I just keep with fresh herbs if I can. When I'm using dried herbs, you want to use if you're using fresh herbs, it's twice as much fresh herbs as it is dry herbs, because dry herbs are more intense in flavor. I do have my own dried thyme that I harvested and dried. I bought drying racks, so let me pass this around just so you can put your fingers in and squinch that up. Yeah, you can smell that. Just squinch it up and you can smell it. I'm not going to cook with that, so get your fingers all in there.
What is this that's dry?
English thyme.
Oh, thyme?
How do you dry it? You just put it on racks?
So I bought drying racks that are made out of this kind of material, you know, it's these, like that, and they collapse, and they hang from the ceilings, so there's like 4 rings, and I hang them upstairs in my upstairs hallway, and I have all of my herbs drying up there.
They smell beautiful.
How long does it take to grow?
Sometimes it takes about 2 weeks or so, depending on the temperature inside. Yeah, it just depends, but it's a really nice way to use your herbs.
We have so many herbs in this building.
I wasn't, yeah, I'm right there with you, I wasn't doing as much with them as I really could have, so I got those drying racks, and now I'm doing all kinds of herbs. That herb salad is just amazing.
What about the microwave for drying herbs?
I have heard that people do that. I personally haven't. You can also do it in a very low temperatured oven.
No.
You know, people have dehydrators that they use, so there's a lot of options for you, for sure. Okay, so let me, I'm gonna bring this around. Actually, I'm gonna add the herbs to this now, so you get the full sense of the wonderful, fresh scent. Oh, and I didn't add my thyme yet. Let me add my thyme.
I didn't know if it was just that one.
Oh, my goodness. You can. The question was, can you freeze fresh herbs? Yes, you can. And you're not gonna compromise the flavor either.
Oh, my goodness.
Doesn't that smell wonderful? So it's all in how we're gonna add flavor to, we want the flavor to be reminiscent of the original, right? Of the original stuffing, okay? If you're a family who likes mushrooms, you can add that. This would be amazing with sausage in it, added to that, right? All right. Let's see how we did.
Oh, yeah, pretty.
Okay. This one is, there's Corsi, I think is the name. And I really like, oh no, this is a different one. There's another one that I have made by Corsi, which I really like. It's just a little squarer, but I have been very happy with the performance of this. This is made by Power Air Fryer. The one I have is more square. It's, you know, it's variable and depends on what you prefer.
But the volume is
5.8. Yeah. Okay. Done. All right, so here is our cauliflower stuffing. You know, when you think of it, a lot of the food, the carbohydrate heavy foods that we eat, the item that is the heavy carb, like the bread or the pasta on its own, now, I know, bread has a lot of, I love bread, but let's talk about pasta. If I were today to cook up, I'm going to make mashed cauliflower in here, by the way. So since I'm mashing it, I'm just cutting this into slices, not fussing with florets. I'm making it easy, right? And you should too. So in there, it goes in with water. And I'm gonna add a little bit of salt to it.
That cauliflower stuffing you make, could you make that in advance and reheat it?
You can, but just, I think it'll be best if you make it, like you could make it in parts, right? So make the roasted cauliflower and keep that separate from the vegetables, and then reheat the vegetables and add the cauliflower. But the recipe that I got, this is online, the original is to slice up all of that stuff and roast it all together. You know, I made the adaptation of putting them into two different containers.
So you would be roasting the onions and the
Yeah,
celery and everything
yeah,
together.
yeah, yeah. So that may be something that you prefer. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and bring a cover, so I'm just gonna cover this with foil.
Do things stay crispy if you take them out after roasting for a while? I mean, that's the only thing I always,
The more,
Poison.
they'll be crispiest when they come out because the sugars in them will help to keep them that way. But if you take them out of the oven and they're, crispy or whatever, if you keep them exposed to the air, they will not
get
get
soggy.
so moist and soggy.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, but it depends on the item. Like zucchini is a wet vegetable, right? It will only stay crispy right out of the oven on the plate and out
Right.
to eat. But let that sit out and then the water is gonna start coming out.
So with this, it doesn't matter so much. It's
Not so much because we're serving it as a hot item with moisture in it. If it were dry, I think you'd be disappointed too, if it's too dry. This is like too dry of a stuffing. But what I was saying about the pasta, if I cooked up a pound of pasta right now with no salt, no oil, no butter, no nothing, and I served you all a plate of that pasta, you'd be like, take one bite and like, yeah, no, I don't want this. We want what's on the pasta, the olive oil or the tomato sauce or the Alfredo sauce or something like that. So we can change the carrier and still have the great sauce, right? So that's where you start to rethink about the kinds of foods that you're eating. If you want to cut down on carbohydrates and you have pasta 3 nights in a week, pick a night and don't do pasta, and cut that back little by little and do something else with that sauce that you love. Like my husband loves a really nice meat sauce, so I just upped the meat in the sauce and we literally started eating it without the pasta. We were just eating like it was that was the meal. And it was delicious, so we very quickly did not miss the pasta. My rule is if I'm going to make pasta, I have to make it from scratch. And I don't mean out of a box and cook it. I mean take out the flour and
Yeah.
the eggs and then I gotta do it.
How does Kalanta measure against?
It's
strict-
corn.
So it's still a lot of the.
It is. It's orange. Yeah, it is.
Which is better to put on bread, butter or olive oil?
I don't think it,
It doesn't matter.
no, both are healthy fats. If you were to say to me what's better, butter or margarine,
No, I know my.
Yeah. So I think whatever you'd like, yeah. So, okay. All right, so that is going to be our mashed cauliflower, which will take the place of our mashed potatoes. So, yeah.
You said you cooked that in water. I assume there was water in there when you put it in.
Oh, yeah, thank
You
God.
didn't say that. Just wanted to make sure.
Just
Yeah.
checking, right?
Just checking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is good that you check because there are things that I'm talking about a million things and I'm thinking of 5 things
Yeah.
all at one time, so I appreciate that. So, yes, that is boiling in water right now. All right, so let's get the last thing, and I apologize, I printed out the recipe, but I guess I didn't pull it off my printer. This one is on my website, but it's also in my cookbook. This is Beautifully Delicious Cooking with Herbs and Edible Flowers. I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but this is a book that I wrote a couple years ago. And so these are some great recipes for you that really emphasize the use of herbs, in particular the edible flowers is the pretty part, but you don't have to have these flowers in order to create most of these dishes. And so what I tried to do is give you recipes that have multiple variations so that you could make one thing and turn it into others. So what I'm making for you tonight is I'm going to make the gremolata, which is parsley, lemon, garlic, cheese, and olive oil. Gremolata traditionally is served with an ossobuco, which is usually a veal shank stew, right? So the stew comes out to the table and then there's a little jar of the gremolata and you put that into your stew and it wakes up the stew with that acid because that stew is often sweet. Any stews that we cook for multiple hours tend to be sweeter. this will add another layer of flavor. And I loved it so much, I thought, what other things can I do with this gremolata? So in this picture, it's stacked potatoes. Okay, slice the potatoes, toss them with the gremolata, stack them, and I put them in little, you can put them in little muffin tins if you want. I just stacked them on, a tray and roasted them in the oven. I made some for you tonight, but instead of regular potatoes, we use sweet potatoes. Now, do you want to make them into a resistant starch side dish? Make them the day before. Refrigerate them, reheat them. Then they're a resistant starch.
What is your website?
It's going to be on your recipes. It's thecreativefeast.com.
The what?
The Creative Feast.
Oh, Feast.
Yes, but they'll be on the recipes that you're going to get tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm so thirsty. Okay, now let's do, while that's cooking, I'm going to get the gremolata ready. So we take flat leaf parsley, it's all parsley, and just
How long will the gremolata stay fresh in the refrigerator?
It depends on your refrigerator and what you think is fresh. That's a really good question, but it's really hard to answer, right? Because, something.
But it's in olive oil, correct?
It is in olive oil, so it will last for several days, yeah. You can, I wish I had thought of it, but then of course forgot. You could take it and serve it on toasted baguette, right? That would be wonderful, just up the olive oil a little bit. You could even add chopped up olives to it and it would be delicious. You can put it on fish when it comes out of the oven or before it goes into the oven. It's got cheese on it, so it'll melt right onto the fish. You could toss it with pasta if you wanted to. You could toss it with the roasted vegetables, right? We have roasted cauliflower. One of the recipes that I was going to make for you tonight is one that I do, and I roast up butternut squash and then add the gremolata to that. So, there's so many things you can do with this. If you are making a regular beef stew, go ahead and add this to your beef stew at the table, not in the whole beef stew. Add it at the table because it is a wonderful finish when you're sitting down with a big hunk of bread and lots of real butter and.
If you were making a beef bourguignon, would that be too rich with that?
Oh no, no. It will be a different flavor than what you're used to, but you'll see. You'll see if you like it. If you wanted to add a little bit of rosemary to it, you can. So it's up to you. So we're just chopping our flat leaf parsley.
Excuse me, is that table salt or coarse salt?
This is kosher salt. Yeah, I don't use like an iodized salt because it does often. I don't find it to be as flavorful. Kosher salt is nice, but you can use the pink Himalayan salt. You can use any salt you want. Just note that I noticed that I am so used to this coarseness that when I salt things, it's very consistent. When I shifted to the pink Himalayan salt, it was so much finer. I ended up using a lot more without realizing it. So you have to adjust. And I am with the fingers. So some people use teaspoons. It'll be more consistent that way. Okay, so in goes our parsley. I'm going to do some garlic cloves. When you're using raw garlic, you want to be careful you don't use too much. So we're going to use about 3 small.
And that's called a garlic rocker.
Yes, I
I
got
like
it
that
on
thing.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do sell a garlic slicer, which I really like. But I do like this garlic rocker for doing the minced garlic. And in this kind of recipe, you really do need that. Okay, and then we have grated cheese we're going to use. more or less if you like.
What kind of cheese is that?
That's just a grated Parmesan. I'm gonna check on my cauliflower here. I'm just letting it get nice and soft so that I can mash it, just like your potatoes. You're looking for a texture. So that's gonna be just a few more minutes. Okay, then we have our lemon, and we're going to zest this. The zest is where all the oils exist in the lemon, so you don't want to leave those behind. It's a great way to add lemon flavor without adding too much of the acid from the lemon juice. And then we're gonna add our extra virgin olive oil. About a quarter cup or so. You'll see sometimes you need a little bit more. You know, I'm giving you a rough, and it's, you know, like I said, it's on my website as the recipe. It's also in the book, but you'll see. It's really nice. Like, to me, this is just a little too dry, so I'm gonna add a little bit more. I probably added more of the parsley.
It's kind of close to a pesto if you add
Similar.
walnuts.
Yeah.
Similar, but not as, it's much more rough, right? So that's what we're looking at. Okay, why don't I walk this around, because it smells wonderful with the lemon in there.
Would it make any difference if you roasted the cauliflower in this situation and then mashed it in terms of?
Yes, you're not gonna get the same texture.
You wouldn't, okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Just gonna spoon it on the back that meal.
I know,
Yeah.
yes, you and I will sit out in the parking lot together in the dark. Okay.
So is there a problem that you don't get the same texture if you were to roast the cauliflower? I mean, you'll
Mashing it, we're mashing
I
it.
know, but does she say instead of boiling it?
Right, if you
roast
roasted it and then mashed it.
I don't know, I mean, I don't think you get it will be drier coming out of the
Yeah, and
oven.
some of that caramelization too, in
Yeah.
the roast.
Well,
Might be good.
here's the great thing. This is what I say, today the recipe is mine, tomorrow's yours. You should try it.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, you should
Yeah.
try it. That's where some of our best ideas come from. It's like, oh, you know, why don't let me try it this time.
Well,
and
you
see
did the
what
hard part, you came up with a recipe combination.
Oh, thank you. That is so nice of you. Actually, I did come up with this. I did some recipes. You know what I do when I'm thinking of something? I will go and I will look at no less than 3 recipes similar to what I want to do, and then I make my adjustments and changes to what I want. So, okay, so there's our gremolata. And then what we do is we just slice these are my sweet potatoes. I washed them, I didn't take off the skin. I'm making it easy for myself. We eat potatoes without taking the skin off, right, when we roast them. So why do I need to take the skin off as long as I've washed it? And then you're gonna slice them, and I have a mandolin that I use. You know, you may have one that you're a little nervous about using. I think it's one of those tools people get nervous about, and I don't blame you particularly with a sweet potato because they are a very tough vegetable. So you really have to give it some muscle, but once you get going, you can get a nice slice, and I do a nice thin slice on that. But if you're going to use your knife, go ahead, just get it nice. You'll have to have a nice sharp knife for that. The other thing too is there are some of those spiralizers that you can use with the sweet potato, and they do have the flat Yeah, you could do that and cut them all the same size and then do the same thing as I'm doing, so you can
Would a
be,
food processor make it too, the pieces too small?
oh, I don't know, I've never used one for that purpose. But you guys should get together, she'll roast the cauliflower and then you'll put
Yeah, I
it
was gonna
into.
say, you're
Yeah.
selling me on that one.
Yeah, that's
So
a
my
good idea.
husband bought my son a Kevlar, I think it's Kevlar, very, very, very thin glove to wear when he uses his mandolin.
Okay,
That you can buy, I think it's made of Kevlar or
Yes,
something.
yeah,
And
yeah.
his mandolin is beautiful, it's very sharp.
Yes.
And has never cut his hands on it.
good, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was working professionally in my first kitchen job, of course, in 1 week, I sliced myself 3 different
Oh,
times.
oh,
with
ouch.
Yeah. It's just, it came in threes, and then of course, through workman's comp, I had to go and get, it was a thick glove. It wasn't the nice thin one that sounds like your son has, but I have not cut myself. Yeah, so, recently.
So people got a little extra protein with their meal?
Yes, yeah. Okay, so I am now, we're going to do our, so let me just show you that I did go ahead and pre-make these for you. So I tossed these in here, run them through with my hands. I made short stacks for you, but, how many do we have? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So there's enough, you can each take 2 stacks. I could have made a taller stack, but this is what I ended up making for you. So that is so they typically will be taller. So it's really nice if you're serving it as a side dish, then people take 2 stacks each and they're good to go. Again, I would make these higher. I put them in, you can cook them like this, which is how I did this, right in these pans, or you can put them in muffin tins, which will help to keep them in their stacks, but as you can see, I had no problem with these. So we have.
And again, it doesn't matter if that comes out crispy and you're eating it crispy, it really doesn't matter.
No, and actually I would, right before you want to put it in and get it nice and crisp.
Okay.
I do like the crispiness. And you can put a little bit more cheese on top if you like. That's entirely up to you. Okay, so now we have this and it has, now it's nice and soft. And I've actually cooked away pretty much all of the water. Not that that was my intention, it just worked out that way, so that's good. Now comes time to flavoring it. So, in my quest to find low-carb foods, my favorite website for recipes and for guidance in low-carb is called dietdoctor.com. And their recipes, you'll notice that a lot of recipes that are low-carb or ketogenic use cream cheese as a wonderful addition to make things creamy but still add good fats to it. So that's what we're using here, and it melts beautifully, and it will make our cauliflower creamy. And that's important because remember, we're trying to do something that is not, it's not mashed potatoes, but we want to give that sense of a mashed potato. And mashed potatoes are much creamier than cauliflower because cauliflower doesn't have the starch in it that potatoes do. So we're melting that, and of course, we're going to add some butter to that. And we'll add that. And then one website, I went to mash these, I was making them the other night, and I don't know, I had one of my mother-in-laws, I had her potato masher, and the whole thing just fell apart. So, I do have my immersion blender.
Oh.
So we'll use this. Oh, came apart.
Yeah.
lightly.
Well, those are gonna be different.
Yes.
Potatoes.
That's good. Okay, so we have that. I'm just gonna chop up a little of my parsley, add that in for a little bit of color. I have not added salt or pepper. Now here's why I wait until the end. Cream cheese has a lot of salt in it, so we don't want to add any until the end. Okay, and again with the gremolata, the Parmesan has a lot of salt in it, so you want to wait until you've got everything together and then you want to season it. Add a little parsley in there. I'll salt and pepper it, but looks pretty good.
Just like potato, doesn't it?
Alright, I'm gonna stir that up. Gonna give that a taste. Oh, we did it. What time is it? Oh, good, I did, okay. That's a little bit salt. Alright. So we have that. I'm gonna bring a quick heat to this, so you guys will have this hot. Oh, come on. Oh, I know what happened. I don't know why that happened. No, my little. Yeah, okay. My little safety thing went down, so there we go. Alright, it's getting time to get a new one, I think. Alright, and then we have our cranberry sauce, frozen raspberries,
So have these been thawed already? I mean,
they're still frozen,
they're still frozen?
are warm. Well, and I'll tell you something, when you go to put this out, you're gonna put them in, they'll, you know, you can let it sit on your counter for a little bit, but you see how beautiful those are?
It's lovely.
That was fast for what?
Yes, that was a 10-minute sauce, right?
Cranberry sauce.
Isn't it nice when it's revealed to you, it's like, wow, that is so much easier than I ever thought. The whole cranberry sauce thing, my brother serves cranberry sauce out of the can, but for their family it's a joke. You know, it's like, oh, don't forget the cranberry sauce, and they do it that way. So that's their fun thing. And now the kids are so used to the flavor that if you bring something else, they're like, it's not the same. And this is the hard thing about a meal like this,
Yeah.
right? So. Oh, but the scent of this, and if you're somebody who loves stuffing, seasoning the traditional bells, go ahead and add it in. Don't, you know, just because I didn't doesn't mean you shouldn't, right? So we have that. We have these guys here. You can help yourselves. Like I said, there's enough for two for each of you if you'd like. So you can help yourself to those. And then we have our mashed potatoes, a la mashed cauliflower. And recipes here, there's plenty for everybody, and I also have, a guide to low-carb resources that I have been using that I highly recommend. The Big Fat Surprise, if you wanna learn more about fats in our diet and, how changing the fats in your diet can make a huge difference for you. Delay, Don't Deny. I'm an intermittent faster, and I have found that that has been the best way for me to get healthy, and all of that. So all of that information is there. If you're interested, I'll just leave that down
And
here.
is that the diet website?
Diet Doctor, yes, and you'll love it because it's done in such a nice way, and,
That's just one.
it is
Oh,
an
it's one.
international movement now
Oh,
to
I
be
see.
eating that way.
DOCTOR or DR?
Doctor, yes, the spelling it out. Mhm.
Do you also
Yeah, supper.
subscribe to
At dinner,
full fats for dairy, like sour cream and yogurt?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
it smells so
Absolutely.
good.
especially for children and for, older people.
Yeah.
The fact that we cut fats out of our diet is a problem for our brain function, our clarity.
What about Halloween?
Halloween is candy. What about Halloween?
Sugar.
I'm not doing it, so, but I also, because I'm an intermittent faster, it's time restricted eating, so I only eat in certain amounts of time during the day, so between
Very
it,
much
you're
for
welcome.
doing this. It looks delicious.
So your intermittent fasting is that you limit your consumption every day?
Every day.
Not, you don't like eat 5 days and not eat?
No, that's a 5-2, for some people that works for them, they eat normally for 5 days and then 2 days they fast for 24 hours each of those days. I don't do that, I fast every day. So I'm typically, like today, I ate in a 2-hour window. But I ate a lot of food. Not, I didn't overeat.
What do you mean by fast?
I do not eat for most of the day.
Oh.
So I don't eat breakfast. I wait until about 2, 3 o'clock to eat. And I'll eat, if I feel like having 2 meals, I'll have 2 meals. But I close my window at a certain time and then I don't eat anymore.
So you typically will eat 2 hours during the day, and that's it?
Yes. What? No, not during the fast. The fast is a clean fast. It's plain black coffee, water, black tea, or green tea, no flavor.
Did your doctor approve of it?
I didn't ask my doctor. My doctor went to, took nutritional training 4 hours out of her entire medical training. Why am I gonna take advice from my doctor? If it makes me feel good, if I'm not on medication. If you're on medication, you need to talk to your doctor, but I am not. So if it makes
Your
me feel
earring.
good.
Oh, yes, thank you.
I haven't spotted it. I've gone home without it. I wonder why it felt so good. I love the potatoes, they're wonderful.
Oh,
The
good.
cauliflower potatoes.
Yes,
I
yes.
cauliflower in the grocery store, you know, it's by one of those frozen companies.
Yeah, I love corn, you'll have garlic, you'll have parsley, you'll have, you know,
Yeah.
mashed potatoes.
Yes, exactly.
Parsley.
Right,
Some
right.
people think, wait a minute, so I like now lemon, adds a little bit to the
Yes,
goodness to it.
yes.
I on the
I
channel.
put it,
It's
part-
okay,
I
we
let
aren't
this
gonna hurt.
soften up first, the onions and the celery, then I added the garlic and let it cook.
When I was 5 years old, my mom was my friend and her father, and our friends had slaughtering meat with hot turkey with his head. And Elvis stayed with me.
Yeah, but in
Yeah, my
some
son
curries,
worked
you're
for
making
Slaughterhouse
essentially a
in-
paste
in
of
Westport
onions,
in,
ginger, garlic, and
He
you're
does-
mixing
he
them all.
doesn't do
You
the
wanna
slaughter,
soften
but he
them
does
up.
for the.
But
he
curries
does
don't
for-
really cook for a long time,
This is
so it
for-
should, just add more garlic.
Never
If
gonna
you feel
put
like
it
it's
in
not
there.
enough, add more.
I'm not a meat
I mean,
eater.
it's not gonna hurt you, right? I mean, it's just building the
I
flavor.
only
Now, here's the other thing to remember.
Also,
As we
Yeah, that's about
age,
it.
we lose our sense of taste.
I eat a lot of fish.
And so we need more flavor. So you may be following a recipe that, I know it sounds silly, but a young person wrote,
I do.
right? And you demand more flavor, so add more
No, my
flavor.
mother had
Don't be
cooked
afraid.
salad, but I don't. My
It's
husband
your
wanted
dish.
to, but
You know, that's
a
the
lot of
beauty
work.
of it. Yeah.
But I'm past
Good.
my
Oh, yeah.
season.